As this girl stepped out of the classroom, she picked up a notebook and noticed a man walking ahead. She hurried after him to return it, but by the time she reached the end of the hallway, both of them had mysteriously vanished. Not long after, her father at home turned on his daughter's computer, only to hear strange sounds coming from it. Terrified, he called his wife over, and they were both horrified to see their daughter being brutally tortured on the screen. Soon after, her body was discovered in a forest, covered in burns, with all the fingernails on her hands and feet ripped out. Bruises suggested the torture had lasted at least several days. This led the police to recall 3 gruesome murders that took place in Seoul, South Korea 15 years earlier. In those cases, the killer tortured and murdered 3 young women, then dumped their bodies in front of their homes, deliberately ensuring the victims' parents would be the first to see the corpses. But this time, the case was different. The killer sent a video instead of leaving a body like before. The investigation team speculated that the killer derived pleasure from forcing the parents to witness their child's torture, inflicting far greater suffering than simply letting them see the body. This suggested the perpetrator harbored an intense hatred for familial bonds. However, the police still had no suspects. Detective Lee Han, though, noticed something unusual in the video. The masked man didn't seem to be acting solely for himself. He appeared oddly preoccupied with how others perceived him. Additionally, Lee observed that the camera was shaky, indicating it wasn't fixed in place. Throughout the assault, the man repeatedly turned his head toward the lens, as if he was mindful of another presence, possibly another perpetrator. Sure enough, forensic reports confirmed that the DNA collected from the victim's body in this case didn't match the DNA from the previous cases. It seemed there were 2 perpetrators, one responsible for the assault and the other filming. The mastermind, with a more controlling personality, likely let the weaker accomplice commit the crime first, securing incriminating evidence to hold over them. This manipulation gradually turned the controlled accomplice into someone addicted to the thrill of harming others. Hunjun visited the girl's school to retrieve surveillance footage from before her disappearance. He discovered that after leaving the classroom, she followed someone and vanished without a trace. After analyzing the situation, Hunjun theorized that one of the killers deliberately chose blind spots in the camera coverage to lure her, while the other hid behind a door to strike. The pair worked together to abduct her, succeeding because they exploited her kindness and willingness to help. However, the police investigation couldn't keep pace with the killer's rapid pace of murder. One of the perpetrators pretended to be disabled and deliberately fell in front of the girl. As she stepped forward to help him, the other killer suddenly attacked her from behind with a stun gun. The accomplice, who had been waiting nearby, quickly drove up to whisk her away. What followed were the brutal torture sessions inflicted on the girl. The investigation team promptly began profiling the criminals to narrow down suspects. The fact that the victims initially followed the killer willingly suggested the perpetrator had an appearance that easily inspired trust. The killer was likely between 20 and 30 years old. Based on the timing of the crimes and body disposals, it seemed he either lacked a stable job or worked freelance. The nature of the torture hinted at a history of parental abuse or domestic violence in his past. Still, these clues alone made it difficult to pinpoint a specific suspect. However, Hunjun's sharp eye caught a tattoo on the killer's wrist in the video. The tech team immediately enhanced the video footage, revealing a familiar S tattoo. Detective Lee Han reacted instantly. The S on the wrist stood for S Culture, a live streaming website secretly producing fake S&M videos. The operator of S Culture was Jae-dae, who had a long rap sheet, including multiple stints in prison for violent crimes. Records showed he had suffered domestic abuse as a child, aligning closely with the police's criminal profile. Recently, Jae-dae registered a new company. When the police arrived, they were met with chilling screams. The suspect stared directly into the camera while beating a girl, ignoring her desperate pleas for mercy, showing no intention of stopping. Furious, a female officer subdued him. Under interrogation, he confessed that the place masqueraded as a legitimate trading company, but was actually a secret hub for filming pornographic content. He claimed what they had just witnessed was staged. Under questioning, the suspect revealed that he and Jae-dae had once worked together at S Culture, which explained why they both had identical S tattoos on their wrists. Meanwhile, Captain Kang and Hyunjun stormed Jae-dae's house, only to be blocked at the door by his father. Hearing the commotion, Jae-dae panicked and fled inside. Hyunjun chased him all the way to the rooftop. Terrified of returning to prison, Jae-dae leapt from the building and died on impact. However, Captain Kang discovered a piece of the victim's fingernail on the table in Jae-dae's bedroom. serving as evidence of his crimes. Yet, the chaotic state of his room starkly contrasted with the controlling personality of a mastermind. The absence of mirrors, classic sign of self-denial, suggested Jae-deok was the type to be controlled rather than the one in charge. Sure enough, Captain Kang found a group photo in his room. According to the suspect's statement, besides Jae-deok, there was another person named Jung-sok, who also had the same wrist tattoo and worked at S-Culture. When they arrived at Jung-sok's house and knocked on the door, his wife appeared flustered, fumbling with her shirt buttons as if trying to hide something. As they stepped inside, they immediately noticed the meticulously tidy room. Jung-sok's wife Yoo-kyun claimed she hadn't been able to contact her husband for a long time. When she heard about Jae-deok's death, she seemed slightly rattled, but quickly insisted that her husband only knew him casually. Hyunjun's attention was drawn to a pile of empty liquor bottles in the corner. He remarked to Yoo-kyun that her husband seemed to enjoy drinking, but she hurriedly claimed the alcohol was hers. Sensing she was concealing something, the two left their business cards and deliberately departed. However, Captain Kang had already picked up on the room's obsessive neatness and the mirrors placed everywhere, as if someone wanted to control every corner of the house. This was a classic trait of an abuser, and Captain Kang had also noticed signs of domestic violence on Yoo-kyun. The two decided to stake out the house nearby. Yoo-kyun became increasingly worried, tried calling her husband, but couldn't reach him. She was sharp enough to sense the police were close. Suddenly a noise came from upstairs, but by the time the police reacted, it was too late. Yoo-kyun had jumped out of a window to escape. They worried that if Jung-sok realized he was being watched, he might take extreme measures. While the police searched for Yoo-kyun, she unexpectedly turned herself in at the station, her body covered in bruises. She admitted that she had told her husband about the police investigating the murder case, but to her surprise, he didn't say a word. He just started beating her. Under Captain Kang's probing, she confessed the truth. She didn't actually drink, contrary to her earlier claim. She went on to describe her husband as a caring and kind person. When the female officer noticed the ring on Yoo-kyun's hand, she explained it was a gift from her husband, but the officer pointed out it belonged to the victim. Panicked, Yoo-kyun yanked the ring off and threw it to the ground. Once she calmed down, she revealed her husband's location. The police swiftly arrested him and found the tools used in the crime in his car. When confronted with a wall covered in photos of the victims, he appeared visibly shaken and repulsed. Despite the overwhelming evidence, he maintained a calm facade and refused to confess. Desperate to locate the hostage, the police persuaded Yoo-kyun to convince her husband. She looked into his eyes, then at the victim's photos on the wall, and urged him to reveal the missing girl's location. Still, he stubbornly insisted he hadn't harmed anyone, even telling his wife he'd never talk. Hearing this, Yoo-kyun gave up. Yoo-kyun couldn't believe her husband was a murderer, let alone imagine how she'd live alone in the future. Seeing her so fragile, everyone felt sorry for her. But Captain Kang grew suspicious. Jung-sok's car was a mess, yet their home was impeccably neat. Neither he nor Jae-deok had been abused by their mothers, which didn't align with the police's criminal profile. Reviewing the interrogation footage, they noticed Jung-sok constantly tried to appear calm, displaying defensive tendencies. When he looked at the victim's photos, he seemed scared and repulsed. Jae-deok had shown a similar reaction. Yoo-kyun, however, was the opposite. She wasn't afraid. She even took the initiative to lock eyes with her husband first. Her composure was chilling. Jung-sok kept watching her, as if waiting for her cues. It dawned on Captain Kang. Yoo-kyun was feigning weakness to frame her husband and make him take the fall for her. In the end, she manipulated him into promising not to talk. Audio analysis confirmed their suspicions. She was the true culprit who deserved to die. It turned out Yoo-kyun had played the victim, orchestrating everything by pushing Jae-deok and Jung-sok to act. They urgently called the officers escorting her, but as one turned around, she stunned him with a taser, grabbed the car keys, and set off to deal with the victim herself. Strangely, despite knowing the police were onto her, she still took the risk. Captain Kang reasoned it was her confidence in controlling her husband completely. She didn't want the police to reach Jung-sok first. By acting preemptively, she aimed to maintain the upper hand. Further investigation uncovered Yoo-kyun's motive, rooted in her past. They found her medical records. When she was 15, a hospital had discovered she'd been assaulted and helped her report it to the police. The police had investigated Yoo-kyun's stepfather as a suspect, but the team couldn't figure out why her trauma, stemming from his abuse, translated into targeting the victim's mothers. It turned out that Yoo-kyun's own mother had gone to the police station and pressured her to conceal the truth. As a result, Yoo-kyun retracted her statement, allowing her stepfather to evade suspicion. From then on, her life became a living hell. Even the mother she trusted most failed to protect her, fueling an intense hatred for the mother-child bond. Over time, her psyche twisted, and she began committing crimes to vent her rage on victims and their mothers. Captain Kang knew they couldn't wait any longer. He needed Jung-sok's testimony to break his loyalty to Yoo-kyung. He lied, claiming they'd found evidence of her crimes. The first 2 victims bore Jae-deok's DNA, but by the 3rd case, he grew terrified and refused to continue. That's when Yoo-kyung deliberately targeted Jung-sok. Jae-deok, meanwhile, took his own life to avoid prison. Coward like him could hardly be the type to collect a victim's fingernails as a trophy. This left only one possibility. Yoo-kyung had framed him. From the start, she'd manipulated both men to take the fall for her. Seeing Jung-sok begin to unravel, the team delivered a decisive blow. They played a video found in his house, showing him torturing a victim, evidence Yoo-kyung had planted to frame him and clear herself. To her, men were mere tools. Realizing the truth, Jung-sok revealed the victim's location to the police. But when they arrived, Yoo-kyung had already moved her. Fortunately, after a relentless effort, they finally managed to stop Yoo-kyung in time. Just as Yoo-kyung raised her knife to stab the girl, the female officer swiftly tackled and subdued her. With that, they closed the case of the serial torturer. But soon after, they were thrust into another investigation, a series of murders in the Southwest. A witness was left in shock after discovering a blood-soaked female body. This was South Korea, a small country teeming with depravity. Over the past few months, 4 similar murders had occurred, all targeting young, beautiful women. The killer hunted victims through a second-hand goods trading website, luring them with discounted prices. Once a girl arrived for an in-person transaction, he'd concoct excuses to get her into his car, knock her out, and take her to a remote location. There, he'd chain her in a grim iron cage. To leave no trace, he not only cut off their fingernails, but also doused them with alcohol to destroy any evidence, leaving the police with no leads on his identity. Reviewing the 4 cases, they noticed all victims vanished on holidays. The first 3 were killed 7, 6, and 5 days after disappearing, respectively. They theorized the 4th victim had just 4 days left, giving them less than a day to save her. But Captain Kang suspected she was already dead. Examining missing persons reports, he uncovered an overlooked case, a girl who disappeared after running away from home. Her death was initially attributed to slipping during heavy rain, but she was actually the 5th victim, with only 3 days of survival. Sure enough, her body was found in a dumpster, reeking of decay, a hallmark of the killer's methods. Not only had he removed her fingernails, but he'd also taped her eyes shut to avoid identification. Moreover, signs of assault were evident on her body. The killer had no direct connection to the victims, but this time there was a key difference. They detected hesitation in his actions. Captain Kang believed he was deliberately misleading the police. They quickly conducted a psychological profile. His ability to erase logs from the second-hand trading website suggested he was a tech-savvy young man. He could convince the girls to enter his car without suspicion, indicating a trustworthy, yet unremarkable appearance. The marks on the victims' bodies showed he relished the process, perhaps even addicted to it. This could stem from childhood trauma, leading to obsessive-compulsive tendencies. He harmed others to assert his own power. The victims were assaulted before death, but without signs of direct intercourse, hinting at a physical imperfection. Captain Kang theorized he might have started committing crimes as a teenager. The killer's timeline between crimes was shrinking, so they had to catch him fast. As Captain Kang predicted, the perpetrator had set his sights on a new target, Na-kyung, Hyunjun's younger sister. Noticing her brother's worn-out shoes, she decided to buy him a new pair online, unknowingly falling into the killer's trap. She arrived at the meeting spot, and he fabricated an excuse to get her into his car. Na-kyung warily glanced at the crowded street but still got in. Once inside, he locked the doors. Sensing danger, she discreetly called Hyunjun, but he was on another call. By the time he called back, her phone rang, but she didn't dare answer. This only heightened the killer's excitement. He put on gloves and snatched the phone from her hands. He answered the call, but stayed silent, then casually tossed the phone out of car. The police suspected this was the same killer as before. Age, appearance, and the holiday timing all matched. Hyunjun traced Na-kyung's movements and found she'd reached the car before vanishing. Then he recalled that 10 minutes earlier, she'd sent him a voice message. In it, Na-kyung told her brother she had something to say, but couldn't reach him. Hyunjun heard her pause near a street vendor across the road. He questioned the vendor, who confirmed she'd gotten into a silver car, but hadn't seen the license plate clearly. Luckily, Hyunjun spotted a nearby traffic camera. To flush out the suspect, a female officer posed as a novice driver and intentionally bumped his car, luring him to a parking lot where they could apprehend him. Still, he refused to reveal Na-kyung's whereabouts. They found an encrypted laptop at his home. Cracking it could reveal Na-kyung's location, but it was rigged with a self-destruct mechanism. 5 wrong password attempts would wipe its memory. Captain Kang noticed something else. The victims' bodies showed signs of resistance, yet the suspect Ye-seok had no scratches or injuries. Autopsies confirmed the killer taped the victim's eyes to avoid identification. This time, a meticulous and obsessive perpetrator had dumped a body quietly in a crowded area. If he wasn't someone with multiple personalities, it suggested Ye-seok had an accomplice, the real mastermind. Though intelligent, Ye-seok's submissive nature made him a follower. This accomplice pretended to protect him but treated him like a subordinate. His unassuming appearance likely stemmed from a lack of confidence around women. The police quickly dug deeper and discovered Ye-seok had spent 3 years in a juvenile detention center for theft. In such places, kids often sought protection, so they figured his accomplice might be traceable there. Supervisor Sang-chol found it hard to believe, as Ye-seok had no friends back then. But a staff member suddenly wondered if it could be someone who'd once hung out with him. Sang-chol pressed her for details, and she explained they were just detention center acquaintances. His name was Hun-tae. Coincidentally, while searching Hun-jun's car, they'd found Hun-tae's business card. Since age 15, he'd been in and out of juvenile facilities and now worked at an auto repair shop. But the killer stayed one step ahead. By the time police reached the shop, Hun-tae had already been taken out. Before Hun-tae died, he showed fear but no signs of resistance. It was clear that he had been killed while completely off guard. The killer had stabbed him through the mouth, a brutal act that seemed like punishment for snitching, meant as a warning. Hun-tae's last call was to the police, and he packed a bag and passport, as if fleeing someone's control. Captain Kang speculated something significant had happened at the detention center that year. Ye-seok and Hun-tae were involved, with someone manipulating Ye-seok to target women. The true killer had now eliminated Hun-tae, hinting at a deeper conflict among the three. According to a staff member from the facility, Ye-seok was constantly bullied by Hun-tae and his crew. He'd once tried to end his life to escape. With old wounds reopened, Ye-seok finally recounted what had happened in that room years ago. After being beaten unconscious, Ye-seok would be pinned down on the table while one of the bullies carried out their vile acts. This torment continued until someone appeared, someone who completely saved him. This person asked Ye-seok if he wanted one of the two, Hun-tae or his accomplice, taken care of. Ye-seok nodded frantically. The stranger then asked what Ye-seok would do in return. Desperate, Ye-seok promised anything. The man smiled cryptically, saying they'd be together forever, and told Ye-seok to choose. Pressed to decide, Ye-seok pointed at the accomplice. True to his word, the stranger dealt with him. Hun-tae, spared by chance, began submitting to this figure, aiding in his plans to harm others. He never named this person, but someone capable of resolving their conflict and dominating them could only be a guard. However, when the police investigated all the staff members from the juvenile detention center at the time, they found no one suspicious. At that moment, Hyun-jun realized that those with free access to the detention center and authority akin to a guard were the supervisors. Suddenly, a female officer connected the dots. The person tied to Ye-seok and Hun-tae with obsessive-compulsive tendencies was Sang-chol, the supervisor she'd spoken to earlier. To avoid tipping him off, the two staked out his house and saw him drive off at midnight. After tailing him for a while, Hyun-jun noticed Sang-chol seemed to be taking deliberate detours. They forced him to stop, only to realize they'd been lured into a trap. Sang-chol was now eager to deal with his prey. Fortunately, the tech team cracked Ye-seok's laptop and found he'd been tracking the victim. Detective Lee Han keenly observed the light bulb in the cage holding the victim was swaying at a consistent interval, oscillating in a rhythmic pattern. They deduced Na-kyung was being held on a boat, and the only place capable of live streaming was the Han River. But with over 600 boats docked there, finding her was like searching for a needle in a haystack, and they had less than an hour. Captain Kang knew they had to force Ye-seok to talk fast. He ordered the interrogation room's temperature lowered, knowing a drop in body heat would slow brain function. Then he had a box of blank papers brought in, labeled with Sang-chol's name on the outside, to trick Ye-seok into thinking the police had evidence of Sang-chol's crimes. They pretended Sang-chol was already in custody. As Ye-seok grew visibly anxious, Captain Kang pressed him. Was locking women on a boat his idea? He told Ye-seok that Sang-chol was pinning everything on him, yet here he was still defending him. Ye-seok immediately protested, insisting Sang-chol wasn't that kind of person. As he teetered on the edge of breaking, Captain Khan struck at his weakness. He told Ye-seok that Sang-chol had exploited his loyalty, using him even more ruthlessly than he had Hyun-tae, that Sang-chol was nothing but a bloodthirsty monster. Ye-seok snapped, yelling at Kang to shut up. Kang then pulled out a photo of Ye-seok's family to appeal to his conscience. Sensing the moment was right, he showed him Na-kyung's picture and demanded her location. But by the time Hyun-jun reached the scene, Sang-chol had already moved her. He'd chained Na-kyung by the neck with iron shackles and dragged her deep into the forest. Based on Khan's analysis, Sang-chol was the type to sacrifice his own life to complete his murderous plan. He'd wait for the perfect moment to strike. Even with just 10 minutes left, someone discovered an abandoned juvenile detention center nearby, a place Sang-chol visited every weekend. That year, an arson incident had occurred there, coinciding with Sang-chol's departure from the facility. Captain Kang concluded this was where Sang-chol planned to deal with Na-kyung. Just as Sang-chol was about to strike, they arrived in time. To distract him, Captain Kang deliberately provoked him, mocking that Sang-chol had probably never had a girlfriend. With the Southwest serial murder case resolved, it turned out that years ago, after a failed confession to a girl, Sang-chol felt everyone was laughing at him. Enraged, he set the detention center ablaze. When he later learned he was infertile, his psyche twisted further, leading him to abduct and harm women. It was the only way Sang-chol felt exhilarated. Infuriated by Kang's taunts, he raised his gun to shoot, but Hun-jun swiftly overpowered him, rescuing Na-kyung. With the Southwest serial murder case resolved, attention turned to the long-forgotten gut-ripper killer, dormant for 7 years. South Korea, though small, seemed rife with deviance. In 2000, a horrific series of murders shook the nation. Killer committed 12 brutal crimes, claiming 21 victims regardless of gender or age. He always attacked men first, gravely injuring them, then forced them to watch as the women with them died in agony. Afterward, he'd take trophies from the bodies, leaving them for the next victim. He even sent audio recordings of his crimes to the police, confessing to killing 2 people with a knife. Though he'd done it many times, Killer admitted to growing weary, mockingly adding that perhaps with more practice, he'd get used to harming people. Yet one day, he abruptly stopped. 10 years later, as the police chief lay on his deathbed, he revealed a long-hidden secret to Captain Kang. The killer had sent him a note. If the police ceased investigating, he'd halt his hunt as long as the chief lived. But if they persisted, the chief's family would be next. Back then, the chief had struck a deal, disbanding the task force to protect his loved ones. Now, with the aging chief nearing death, the killer would surely resume his spree and target Captain Kang, head of the Special Investigations Team. That very night, as predicted, the murderer set his sights on a couple. While the young man stepped out to make a call, the killer struck, plunging a precise stab into his stomach. He then severed the tendons in the man's legs and tied him to the driver's seat. Next, he pulled out a knife and killed the woman right in front of him, the man's anguished expression fueling his excitement. The bodies were discovered the next day. The Special Investigations Team grew alarmed upon seeing the killer's signature. He'd left the previous victim's glasses on the body. Those glasses belonged to Jun Chol, the sole survivor of the gut ripper's spree 7 years earlier. Stabbed dozens of times, Jun Chol had miraculously lived. The team theorized the killer left the glasses to atone for that failure and send them a message. They had to act fast to prevent further danger. But when the killer vanished, Jun Chol disappeared too. Fortunately, a book analyzing the gut ripper case had hit the market, detailing the murders from that year. The Special Investigations Team suspected the journalist who wrote it was connected to Jun Chol. After digging into the journalist's recent activity, they found he frequently called a public phone booth. Captain Kang dialed the journalist's number from that booth, and with the journalist's help, the police quickly located Jun Chol. When he saw the glasses, he panicked, trembling. He asked the police in a terrified voice if the killer had resurfaced. He called the murderer a true demon. It turned out that back then, Jun Chol had been about to propose to his fiancée when the killer knocked on their car door. The assailant stabbed Jun Chol over 30 times. Though he miraculously survived, he was forced to watch his fiancée die a horrific death. Jun Chol clenched his fists tightly. The pain of losing the one he loved resurfaced, causing Jun Chol to burst into tears. From then on, he could only eat peppermint candy to ease his stress. The murderer remained at large, beyond the reach of the law. While Jun Chol was left unprotected by the police were forced to reopen the case files from that year to review the suspects. Surprisingly, at that very moment, killer took the initiative to call Captain Kang. He asked Captain Kang whether he truly intended to stand firm in his beliefs. Captain Kang mocked the killer's insecurity while firmly declaring that he would not negotiate with him. Hearing this, the murderer decided to prepare a surprise for Captain Kang. The killer targeted a family of 4 who were out on a picnic. The screams of the elderly couple being attacked shattered the silence of the night. The boy covered his sister's mouth as they hid behind a tree, but unbeknownst to them, the murderer had already spotted them. As the boy was calling for help, the murderer suddenly appeared and threatened him. This time, the killer deliberately placed the watch of a previous victim on the ankle of the corpse. He intentionally let the 2 children go as witnesses and left a photograph for them to deliver to the police. When Hyun-jun saw the photo, he was immediately stunned because the 2 people in the picture were none other than Captain Kang's wife and son. Captain Kang received a call from the murderer, who forced him to make a deal. Captain Kang responded with silence at first, but after a moment he shouted in anger, demanding that the killer not touch the children. The murderer let out a sinister laugh, saying that things were about to get very interesting. Before hanging up, the special investigation team immediately sealed off all entrances and exits and checked the mall's security cameras. They saw that the killer had taken the child out of the shopping center through an exit on the second floor 25 minutes earlier. Hyunjun quickly gave chase and found the boy still safe. After the incident, Captain Kang, feeling uneasy, assigned another agent to escort his wife and son to a secure location. Based on the descriptions from the two traumatized children, the task force sketched out the suspect profile. They narrowed it down to 3 individuals with matching histories. 1. Jin Huang had emigrated abroad 3 years ago. The second had an alibi for the time of the campground attack. Jin Huang's whereabouts remained unknown, but the killer gave the police no time to rest. That night, he posed as a traffic cop to stop a car, then proceeded to kill another couple. This crime scene was even more severely destroyed. The killer left behind a necklace and took a ring. The police suspected Jin Huang, as the scene was near his old home. The task force raided his house and found a photo of an elderly woman and her grandson on his computer. The walls were plastered with photos of victims, confirming this man as the killer. Among them was a picture of Jun Chol, leading the task force to deduce that the murderer had been hunting for a chance to finish him off. The police set up an ambush near Jun Chol's home, and sure enough, Jin Huang appeared. Spotting the trap, he tried to flee, but they successfully apprehended him. The killer who'd terrorized South Korea for so long was finally caught. Yet Jun Chol felt no relief. Instead, voicing strange doubts, he questioned whether Jin Huang was truly the culprit. Though 90% of the evidence aligned, what if the remaining 10% hid the real truth? From a USB found in Jin Huang's home, police uncovered numerous clues, including countless victim photos. Oddly, before interrogation even began, Jin Huang proactively confessed, detailing every step of his crimes. Captain Kang quickly spotted something off. He firmly declared Jin Huang wasn't the killer. His account of the third recent murder didn't match up. The real murderer had used a public phone to tip off the police, a detail Jin Huang got wrong. Colleagues also noticed him constantly bowing his head, biting his lip, and scratching the back of his hand, clear signs of anxiety and stress. It seemed he was under some threat. Recalling how the killer had once threatened Kang's family, Hyunjun immediately thought of the photo on Jin Huang's computer. He suspected Jin Huang's family was being held hostage by the true culprit, who had everything under control. Just then, Jin Huang lost it, hysterically shouting names at the police, confirming his family was in the killer's grasp. At that moment, the police station's network was hit by a hacker attack, traced back to Jin Huang and the USB found at his home. This revealed that the murderer had been continuously luring the police into his trap. At that moment, Hyunjun suddenly recalled a detail that had been overlooked. The child witness had mentioned that the killer smelled of peppermint candy. Captain Kang pieced all the clues together. How had Jun Chol known that Soji's hand was clenched that day? At the time, Jun Chol had been stabbed dozens of times by the murderer's knife. The truth slowly came to light. It turned out that Jun Chol, the one who had killed dozens of people, was the real murderer. He had posed as a survivor to mislead the police. While the task force was still reeling from this revelation, a video was unexpectedly decoded from a USB drive. The video showed images of Captain Kang's wife and son. Tension engulfed the interrogation room. Jun Chol taunted them further, asking if this was entertaining enough. He questioned whether Captain Kang would rush to save his wife and son. Captain Kang immediately panicked. Without hesitation, Captain Kang decided to rescue the hostages, but his team soon realized the video was pre-recorded. The victims had already been brutally killed. The killer's goal was to strip Captain Kang of both his family and his faith. What alarmed Captain Kang even more was that the USB contained images of the agents assigned to protect his family. Sensing something was wrong, he called them, but no one answered. As feared, disaster had struck. When the task force reached the safe house, the agents were gravely injured, barely clinging to life. From their accounts, the team learned the killer had posed as a cop. He'd used an agent's phone to call Kang's wife, lying that not only had her protectors died, but Kang himself had perished. Hearing this, she collapsed, her mind too overwhelmed to process anything further. In the end, followed the killer's instructions, discarding her phone to avoid being tracked and taking her son to a pre-arranged location. As Captain Kang frantically searched for his wife and son, he received another call from the killer. The murderer declared his intent to strip Kang of all happiness. He'd trick Kang's wife into returning home, where he subdued her. Forcing Kang into a final chase, the killer allowed the couple one last conversation. Sobbing, she told Kang she desperately wanted to see him one more time, but knew it was impossible. When Kang raced home, he found her lying in a pool of blood. blood. Suddenly, he spotted a pair of legs behind the curtain and fired repeatedly, only to hit a bulletproof vest. The two clashed in a fierce struggle, every ounce of pain and rage fueling Captain Kang's strength in that moment. All he wanted was to kill the murderer with his own hands. His teammates, seeing this, warned him not to let such worthless scum control him. It would strip them of their reason to keep living. Regaining his senses, Captain Kang suddenly thought of his son. Thankfully, the killer hadn't found the boy, yet the horrific death of his wife became a lifelong scar. Ironically, just 15 days after his capture, the killer faked a seizure and escaped during transport to the hospital. He once again became a nightmare, plunging South Korea into panic. Simultaneously, a new series of murders targeting beautiful women emerged. These women, dressed seductively, arrived at locations offering services, unaware their drinks were laced with sedatives. After drinking and passing out, they disappeared. The next morning, a real estate agent showing a model apartment to clients opened the kitchen cabinet during the tour, only to discover a body inside. Everyone present screamed in terror at the blood-drenched sight. The police received the report and immediately went to the model apartment to investigate. They discovered the killer had used a kitchen knife from the apartment to cook and even drank wine. After the murder, he'd calmly watched TV and taken a bath. Oddly, the victim had been bludgeoned to death with a blunt object on the spot, and the scene showed extensive blood spatter reactions. Yet the floor was eerily clean, with no traces left behind. If the killer could so casually clean up and enjoy a bath, it suggested he wasn't worried about leaving evidence. But if he was that confident, why meticulously erase the blood? Hunjun theorized the killer wasn't destroying evidence, he was simply tidying up. Clearly, he treated the model apartment like his own home. This was the third similar case recently, all occurring in model apartments with fixed layouts, and all involving blunt force killings. The task force speculated that this was the work of the same murderer. However, aside from construction workers and real estate staff, potential home buyers and marketing personnel could also freely access the model apartments, making it difficult to pinpoint a suspect. Meanwhile, the killer accelerated his pace of attacks. This time, he selected his target through a dating app. At his request, the woman dressed in office attire and wore glasses before arriving at the designated location. When she got there, she realized the entire floor was deserted. The man couldn't hide his excitement. He invited her to his place, but she seemed to sense something off. She suggested they go to a nearby hotel instead. He asked why she'd want to go to a place like that, and urged her to follow him to his house, promising to cover the hotel cost later. Lured by the tempting offer, she couldn't refuse, and unknowingly stepped into danger. The place he led the girl to was empty, completely unlike a lived-in home. The gloomy, cold atmosphere terrified her. The man had deliberately prepared a candlelit dinner, which momentarily reassured her enough to sit down. He even romantically sprinkled flower petals into the bathtub. But the more she thought about it, the more she felt something was wrong. She pretended to have a headache and said she needed to go downstairs to buy medicine. However, he had no intention of letting her leave. Ruthlessly, he smashed her head with a wrench, leaving her unable to resist. The man planned to repeat his old trick, enjoying a candlelit dinner with her in the beautiful model apartment. Unexpectedly, the sound of a door opening interrupted him. It was a young man who had come to put up advertisements for the model apartment. During a brief struggle, he spotted the woman slumped against the wall in the corner. Instead of saying anything, he wisely left and called police. Unbeknownst to the young man, the killer followed him and brutally struck his head with the wrench. When the police arrived to investigate, they recognized the signature of the same perpetrator. The victim's phone had an 18+ app installed, confirming the task force's earlier theory. The previous 3 victims, despite low incomes, lived extravagantly. Min Young discovered they'd all signed up and used its services. Clearly, the killer was targeting victims this way. The team noted that water and electricity in the apartment had been used for about 15 days, suggesting the killer had no fixed residence and was squatting in model homes like this one. Then Min Young uncovered a similar violent incident from a week earlier. That time, the killer had called for a massage service. The victim arrived at the designated spot and realized it was a new building with no residents. Before she could fully grasp the situation, a man dragged her inside. She realized it wasn't his home. As she tried to leave, he suddenly unleashed a barrage of punches. The woman fell to her knees, begging him to stop, explaining she had a young son who depended solely on her. Without her, he'd starve. Just then, her son called, and the man seemed to hesitate. Seizing the fleeting chance, she leapt up and bolted. She ran to the street, flagging down a car for help. The killer abandoned his plan and fled. According to the survivor's description, he wore a tattered jacket. His shoe soles were caked with mud. He stammered when he spoke, and he reeked of alcohol. In his hand, he held something bizarre. It looked like a flail, with a long, pointed head resembling a bullet, seemingly attached to a chain. Based on this, Li Han sketched its shape. After confirming it, they identified the object as a plumb bob, a tool used on construction sites to measure vertical alignment. The police immediately began profiling the killer's psyche. Model apartments symbolized a perfect home, and his frequent presence there suggested he fantasized them as his ideal space. In this perfect world, he could be with the type of woman he desired. When that illusion shattered, he reacted violently, killing them. It's highly possible that the type of woman he targeted was connected to someone who had caused his psychological distortion, perhaps a parent or a lover. He saw the model apartment as his sweet sanctuary and couldn't bear it being tainted. Combining the survivor's description with his methods, the killer was likely a construction worker or someone involved in building these model homes. Notably, the killer reeked of alcohol, possibly relying on it to fuel his delusions, making them more vivid. This suggested his impulsive behavior was spiraling out of control, urging the police to catch him quickly. Fortunately, they identified a suspect matching the survivor's description. Surveillance footage from a shop across from the fourth crime scene apartment showed him tracing his movements backward. They pinpointed his last known location near an elevated road construction site. Hyun-jun headed there for clues and spotted a homeless man sneaking away in a panic. Recognizing him, Hyun-jun swiftly subdued him, finding the victim's clothes and a lead hammer in his backpack. The man claimed he'd scavenged them, but when told they belonged to a victim, he was visibly shocked and hurriedly admitted to stealing them from someone named Kang. At the time of the incident, he was always at the homeless shelter, and there were other homeless people who could testify that he wasn't the perpetrator. As for the person named Kang, he knew nothing more. The police then released the suspect's description to the public, hoping for tips. Unexpectedly, a construction site provided a lead. A man named Kang Tae-soo. Months earlier, he'd worked for an interior design company. His supervisor described him as odd. After finishing a house, he'd leave a plumb bob mark and even stay overnight, treating it like his own home. However, the identity he'd registered was fake. As the investigation hit another dead end, a man named Young-jun, claiming to be the suspect's older brother, showed up at the station. He suggested the person the police were hunting might be his younger sibling. According to the brother, their family constantly moved when they were young. Their father, an architect, never owned a home. Unable to cope, their mother stole the rent money and abandoned them. Devastated, their father eventually took his own life. Though the two brothers survived, the sudden collapse of their family left the younger one, Young-min, deeply obsessed with houses. They showed photos to surviving victims, who confirmed Young-min as the culprit. Young-jun revealed his brother had been wandering around Muhun-dong, prompting the police to rush there. Local homeless people said they hadn't seen Young-min in a week. However, Hyun-jun noticed a plumb bob mark on a nearby wall, a signature the killer left at places where he'd spent the night. Following these marks might lead them to Young-min's whereabouts. Unexpectedly, when the police reached the target warehouse, an explosion occurred, and Young-min was found dead inside. Based on the remaining liquor bottles and gas canister at the scene, they initially deemed it an accidental blast, but Hyun-jun noticed signs of gasoline being deliberately poured. Meanwhile, a colleague uncovered a crucial clue. Surveillance from an underground tunnel had captured Young-min clashing with a homeless man, getting stabbed and seriously injured. Yet dashcam footage of the suspect just before the warehouse explosion showed no signs of someone wounded. In hindsight, it was bizarre. Right as the police closed in on Young-min, the explosion happened. Captain Kang suspected someone was orchestrating it all, which led him to recall certain suspicious aspects regarding the suspect's older brother. At the time, Young-jun's eyes were bloodshot, his lips cracked and dry. He incessantly drank water, and he kept wiping sweat from his palms. These were typical symptoms of someone suffering from poisoning. Yet in the first case, the killer hadn't used drugs. Starting with the second case though, leftover wine glasses at the scenes tested positive for hallucinogens. The killer had been operating under their influence. Captain Kang theorized that Young-min committed the first murder. After being stabbed and injured by the homeless man, he couldn't continue. Knowing his brother's crimes, Young-jun impersonated Young-min to keep killing. When the police publicly named Young-min as a suspect, Young-jun realized he couldn't hide any longer. So he proactively went to the station, deliberately steering them toward Young-min's location. He then seized the chance to set the fire, kill his brother, and pin all the crimes on the deceased Young-min. Growing up in the same fractured environment, both brothers carried similar psychological scars, giving Young-jun ample motive to kill. Sure enough, after digging into his background, the police found he was in the midst of a divorce. Entangled in a bitter property dispute with his wife, he was also drowning in debt from multiple loans, even mortgaging his house. Captain Kang didn't rush to expose him as the killer. Instead, he deliberately mentioned that they suspected arson, baiting Young-jun. As expected, Young-jun grew visibly anxious, falling right into Captain Kang's trap. That night, he hurried home and pulled a blood-stained notebook from his bag. It was Young-min's murder murder journal. Just as he prepared to destroy the evidence, the police burst in and caught him red-handed. The special investigations team had deduced that Young Min committed the first murder, while Young Jun carried out the subsequent ones, impersonating his brother all along. Inside the backpack, they found Young Min's clothes stained with the victim's blood. Faced with undeniable evidence, the killer had no choice but to confess. It turned out that, drowning in debt, Young Jun learned their mother had left behind a plot of inherited land when she died. To sell it, he needed Young Min's consent. Desperate, he scoured the city for his brother. When he finally found him, Young Min was gravely injured and confessed his crimes. Young Jun also discovered Young Min's murder journal, detailing his killing plans. Driven by curiosity and a twisted desire to experience it himself, Young Jun assumed Young Min's identity and continued the spree. Everything unfolded just as police had predicted, and in the end, what awaited him was the judgment of the law. With that, the series of murders in the model homes was finally solved. Next, the Special Task Force would face a deranged killer named Terry Albert, known from the Ghost Club website. Each time he published a murder novel, real-life cases mirroring the exact details would occur. In the first case, the victim was found with severe burns covering their entire body and all 10 fingernails removed, their body dumped in the wild. After the killing, perpetrator even sent torture videos to the victims' families. Based on the method of murder and disposal, this case closely resembled a prior series of torture killings. In the second case, the victim was discovered bloodied and slumped in a car, the method matching a recently solved series of highway shooting murders. The victim had a ring on their wrist, a trophy taken by the killer from the first case's victim. This was a hallmark of the cruel Terry Albert. After each killing, he'd take an item from one victim and leave it with the next. Since 2000, he had carried out 15 savage murders, claiming 28 lives, regardless of age or gender, including the wife of Captain Kang, leader of the Special Task Force. Just 15 days after being captured, he escaped, once again becoming a nightmare that horrified South Korea. That night, a young woman noticed a stranger struggling to walk and kindly offered assistance, unaware she was stepping into his trap. The following day, her body was discovered near a demolished residential area. After investigation, it was found that this was where the girl was born. The killer had also sent a video of her torment to her mother. Based on the method of killing and the choice of body disposal site, this case closely mirrored the earlier series of torture murders. What particularly caught the Special Task Force's attention was Young Jin, the first to discover the body. He found a business card and a signed book by Captain Kang on the victim, indicating she had attended one of the task force's lectures on criminal psychology. The book, titled The Origin of Evil, was written by journalist Sun, based on interviews with Terry Albert. When the police sought out the journalist for information, they found he'd mysteriously gone missing. Shortly after, another murder occurred. A female driver shot point-blank in the head with a handgun while driving. Given the victim's age, gender, the weapon used, and the isolated road where it happened, the killer was clearly replicating cases the task force had previously solved. It was evident the perpetrator was deliberately targeting the team. They sent The Origin of Evil, written by journalist Sun, for forensic analysis and discovered it was co-authored by 2 people. The tech team also found that the book's official website contained a hidden redirect link to a dark web page, a gathering spot for Terry Albert's admirers. Accessing it required a password. Through analysis, Lee Han traced the website's IP address to a specific page and line in the book. Connecting the corresponding letters formed the word ring, a signature item Terry Albert had recently left behind. Entering it as password successfully unlocked the site. What shocked the task force was that the details of the 2 recent murders perfectly matched content posted on the site, and the updates predated the crimes. This meant someone was using the website to predict the murders. Moreover, these 2 cases suggested the Copycat had a clear connection to Terry Albert. The IP address of the site's operator was registered on an anonymous server, making it impossible to trace. As the task force hit a dead end, the website updated with a 3rd novel describing a murder in a church. Sure enough, a matching real-life case soon emerged. The killer attempted to stab an elderly person in a church but failed. The elder escaped and hid under a bridge where they encountered another man and pleaded for help. Unbeknownst to them, this man was an accomplice. In the end, the elder's throat was slit with a single fatal slash. The killer blindfolded the victim with a black cloth before fleeing the scene. The method and details mirrored a prior serial murder case the task force had solved. At the scene, they found glasses belonging to journalist Sun. At the same time, while the tech team investigated the website, they noticed the letters TGBA repeatedly appearing in the novel's comment section. After digging deeper, they identified it as an acronym for a publication called Mystery World, aimed at university students majoring in criminal psychology. The task force visited the newspaper's office and uncovered an anonymous anonymous individual who, through advertisements, had pre-announced the dates and locations of the murders in the paper. This led Captain Kang to a vague realization: the copycat might have been among the audience at his lecture that day. He immediately ordered the retrieval of surveillance footage from the event and cross-referenced it with footage near the crime scenes to identify individuals with similar builds and clothing. The result narrowed it down to 3 suspects, all members of a university deduction club. Just then, Captain Kang received a call from Terry Albert. The killer taunted him, promising that things would only get more interesting. True to his word, Terry Albert targeted another young woman, and the website updated with a new novel. It detailed the abduction and murder of a girl via a second-hand goods trading site, hinting that the copycat's next method would mirror the Southwest serial murders. Using the meeting location described in the story, the task force pinpointed 3 potential spots and set up ambushes in advance. Meanwhile, while investigating the victim's background, they discovered she had run a deduction website with the initial H engraved on her ring. One of the 3 suspects, Ji Huang, had been romantically involved with her. His social activities were concealed, and the victim had begun suspecting Ji Huang was the copycat killer, leading to her being silenced. Captain Kang suddenly recalled that Ji Huang was the student who'd challenged him at the seminar. He'd grilled Captain Kang, pointing out that the killer had escaped. If Kang truly understood the murderer's mind, why hadn't he caught him yet? Captain Kang had firmly vowed to capture him, no matter what. Ji Huang, it turned out, had been discharged from the military for causing trouble, and now managed a website posting murder novels. As the predicted time approached, Ji Huang appeared at the scene. The task force surrounded and arrested him, successfully rescuing Na Kyung. During interrogation, Ji Huang remained eerily calm. He knew the police lacked direct evidence tying him to the murders, so he staunchly denied all charges. Versed in criminal psychology, he rendered Captain Kang's interrogation tactics useless. Just as in previous sessions, Captain Kang adjusted the lighting to a harsh glare and lowered the room's temperature. He deliberately showed Ji Huang photos of the victims, then maintained a prolonged silence to pile psychological pressure on him. But Ji Huang saw through it all. In the end, due to insufficient evidence, he was declared not guilty and released. At that moment, the bureau chief, who'd always supported the task force, announced that the copycat murder case would be handed over to a large-scale search team. This struck Kang as illogical. The killer, Jun Chol, was targeting their unit specifically, and they were the ones who understood the case best. Yet the chief insisted on following orders from above. Shortly after, he received a call and hurriedly left. Sensing something off about the chief's behavior, Captain Kang instructed the tech team to track his location. Meanwhile, a new prediction appeared on the website. Unlike previous posts, this one lacked specifics about the setting or method, stating only that the next murder would occur one afternoon. The target described was a hostage the task force had previously rescued. At that moment, the tech team traced the bureau chief's movements. He was heading to the hospital where the hostage was being treated. It turned out Jun Chol had kidnapped Chief's daughter, forcing him to kill the hostage Na Kyung. But the real target was the chief himself. When the task force arrived, they unknowingly passed Jun Chol, disguised as a medic. The hostage had already been killed. After successfully abducting the chief, Jun Chol left a message on the website, arranging a meeting with the task force. Then he sent them an unexpected gift. He and Jun cautiously opened the bag, only to recoil in horror. Inside was the head of journalist's son. Jun Chol's audacity stemmed from having kidnapped the children of 5 high-ranking officials as additional hostages. He held them in a sealed room, continuously releasing a pungent, irritating gas. In that room, there was only one gas mask, and he forced the children to kill each other to claim it for survival. Though a large police force had surrounded the cafe outside, they couldn't act aggressively due to the hostages' safety. Jun Chol proposed a deal with Captain Kang, demanding that Kang personally drive him away. Any reckless move, he warned, would leave them collecting the children's bodies. Once at a safe location, Jun Chol did reveal the warehouse where the hostages were held, but withheld the bureau chief's location. With time running out to save the hostages, Kang had no choice but to let Jun Chol go. When Captain Kang reached the warehouse, he found the hostages had fought each other to exhaustion. In truth, the gas Jun Chol released was harmless. The real terror stemmed from the cruelty within human nature itself. At that moment, the bureau chief awoke to his daughter's cries for help. He strained to break free from his restraints. After rescuing his daughter and preparing to escape, he unexpectedly came face to face with Jun Chol, who had just returned. In a desperate act, the chief sacrificed himself to ensure his daughter's getaway. The task force began re-examining the entire case. Based on evidence left at the church murder scene, they confirmed that an accomplice had aided Jun Chol in the serial killings. The copycat murders were a game designed to outwit the team. Jun Chol used murder murder novels to predict timing of the crimes, while his fanatical followers carried them out according to the website's updates. The moment of body discovery was critical. Moreover, many case details, never publicly disclosed by the task force, were perfectly replicated by the copycat. This suggested the culprit had access to internal police information, leading Captain Kang to focus on one person, Officer Choi, who had discovered the body in the first case. Choi worked in the juvenile investigation unit. He'd handed Kang an item dropped at the crime scene, which upon investigation turned out to belong to the fiancé of Jun Chol's seventh victim. Kang suspected Choi was seeking revenge for his fiancée, posing as a Jun Chol fanatic. Whenever the website was updated with a new murder novel, Choi would wait at predicted scene, hoping to catch Jun Chol and seize his chance for vengeance. But after several attempts, he only encountered Ji Wang. At that moment, Jun Chol sent a video of the bureau chief threatening Kang into a deal. The task force must stop pursuing him, and in return, he'd vanish from their lives without a trace. Captain Kang had never compromised with criminals, so the task force decided to use Officer Choi to lure Jun Chol out. When the website updated with a new murder novel, he and Jun disguised himself as Jun Chol and appeared at the scene. Officer Choi, lying in wait as predicted, immediately charged forward. Realizing too late it was a trap set by the task force, Choi was apprehended on the spot. Under interrogation, he confessed that Ji Huang was his accomplice, but Choi wasn't the real target. Captain Kang had long suspected Jun Chol would be lurking nearby to observe, as he'd done before. The task force secretly tracked Jun Chol's car, leading Kang and Hyun-jun to a psychiatric hospital. The origin of Jun Chol's pain. Kang believed Jun Chol had deliberately led them here, choosing this location to signal his intent to end it all. With the bureau chief in grave danger, Captain Kang and Hyun-jun worked together, covering each other as they advanced deeper into the building. Jun Chol monitored their every move through surveillance cameras. When they reached the target room, they found a steaming cup of coffee, suggesting Jun Chol had left moments ago. Kang noticed the chief locked in a room on the monitor. Suddenly, pained struggling sounds echoed from a corner. Hyun-jun instinctively assumed it was the chief, but Kang quickly warned him to step back. As Hyun-jun retreated, Kang called out to Jun Chol, telling him to stop playing games. Sure enough, the figure was Jun Chol, disguised as the chief. Concerned for the real chief's safety, neither dared act rashly. Jun Chol voluntarily removed his ammo clip and challenged them to a final game. He locked the door and tossed a backpack toward Hyun-jun. Inside was a single gas mask. Jun Chol then put on a mask and quickly pressed a remote control to release toxic gas into the air. This time, he wanted to see how Captain Kang and Hyun-jun would react when faced with the line between life and death. Yet what he witnessed was the two men saving each other. As Jun Chol seized the chance to attack Hyun-jun, Kang lunged at him, grappling fiercely. In the chaos, Hyun-jun grabbed a gun from the floor, while Jun Chol took Kang hostage. At that moment, Jun Chol revealed the truth. The bureau chief had been dead for a long time, and of all his crimes, killing Captain Kang's wife had been his most satisfying act. Those words ignited Kang's rage. A barrage of gunshots followed, bringing it all to an end. Captain Kang emerged from the shadows, his face grim. The killer who'd plunged South Korea into fear had finally paid for his sins. And that concludes the entire story of the film. Thank you for following along. Goodbye, and see you next time.